For the past few weeks, we've been on a roll discussing checkpoints and the Fourth Amendment. We began with Edmund, which is our big Supreme Court case that dealt with drug checkpoints and how those are unconstitutional. Then a few weeks later, I discussed Neff, which was a case where the officers conducted a ruse fake checkpoint, where they put out the signs on the freeway saying checkpoint ahead when there really wasn't one. Instead, they were simply watching individuals who would take the next exit off the freeway and they would pull those people over. Very interesting case. Now, just last week, I discussed another checkpoint case and it dealt with what's called informational checkpoints, where the officers stopped every individual, every motorist, and asked him or her about a recent hit and run accident. So check that video out. A lot of you are interested in these checkpoint videos. A lot of you commented if I could explain more about DUI checkpoints and agricultural checkpoints. So this week I picked a case dealing with agricultural checkpoint. We have a bunch of them here in California anytime you enter the state from Arizona, Nevada, and so on. So let's talk about agricultural checkpoints and whether you need to stop at those. Before we go on, I want to thank you for watching me here on YouTube. Welcome to LAWSTACHE channel. In fact, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button now. If you're a returning viewer, I want to thank you all for watching my channel. Over the weekend, I hit 10,000 subscribers. A big step for me. I really appreciate all the viewership. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star review rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to lawstache.com and check out some of the merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts, hats, stickers, and some other items. Thanks for watching.
Quick message from LawStache. Are you charged with a crime? Or do you want to know your rights if stopped by police? Watch California attorney Anton Vialtsin discuss legal cases from the Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit, and California state courts on the LAWSTACHE YouTube page. Anton has handled hundreds of federal and state criminal cases, has an in-depth knowledge of the law, and has the best mustache ever. Subscribe to the LAWSTACHE YouTube page. That's LAWSTACHE.
Today we'll be discussing People versus Dickinson, which is the biggest case I could find from the state of California that dealt with agricultural checkpoints. Mr. Dickinson was approaching Needles Agricultural Checkpoint from Arizona, traveling into the state of California. The officer from the Department of Agriculture noticed that the vehicle had a Michigan license plate. And he later testified that all vehicles that come east of the Rockies present more danger to the crops here in California, and so the inspection would be more thorough. When Mr. Dickinson approaches, the officer comes up to the vehicle and asks for permission to inspect the truck. Mr. Dickinson complies, opens up the back of the truck, and there the officer finds 200 to 300 pounds of marijuana. Now remember, this case is from 1980s, so at that time, the use of marijuana might not have been legal like it is today, but even today, transportation of large quantities of narcotics is still not allowed, even in the states where the use of them might be legal. What do I mean by that? Well, just because California allows an individual to recreationally use marijuana, it doesn't mean that the same person can transport large quantities of marijuana without licensing and so on. And if you go to a dispensary, you might get a bag, keep that receipt, make sure that it's sealed, because again, there are a lot of laws that deal with transportation of marijuana. I've handled many of those cases where a lot of my clients get very much surprised because they purchase it from a dispensary, it's all legal, but then they get charged for illegally transporting marijuana, even small quantities. Here we have a larger quantity. The officer inspects the vehicle, and for the purpose of the Department of Agriculture, they're not so much worried about the legality of the substance, they're more worried about pests. So here, the officer allows Mr. Dickinson to keep driving, but he contacts the officer from the California Highway Patrol who pulls over a vehicle just 100 yards away from the checkpoint. Now, Mr. Dickinson later challenges the initial stop at the checkpoint and says that all of those agriculture checkpoints, which by the way California has 16 of them, are not legal and they violate the Fourth Amendment. Now remember, the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and generally speaking, officers need to have a warrant before they conduct a search or seizure. Of course, at these checkpoints, we're not dealing with a warrant. But throughout the years, the Supreme Court has enumerated a number of exceptions to the warrant requirement, and we know that officers still need to have reasonable suspicion to pull over a vehicle. But here, we're not even dealing with reasonable suspicion. So again, Mr. Dickinson challenges the stop and says that he should have never been pulled over because there's not even reasonable suspicion that he's committing any sort of crime. Now here's how procedurally these checkpoints work. According to Wikipedia, vehicles entering California from Oregon, Nevada, or Arizona are profiled at CBPS checkpoints, which are those agricultural checkpoints, to assess their potential risk. Passenger vehicles with California license plates or those bordering states are considered low risk and are generally subject to only a cursory screening, which consists of an inspector asking the vehicle's driver questions about the content of their vehicle. Other vehicles, particularly recreational vehicles, commercial trucks, or those carrying watercraft or livestock, are considered higher risk and may be subject to a visual inspection of a cargo and contents, which is exactly what we have here. We have an individual who is driving up to the checkpoint with a license plate from Michigan. Now here's what the law says. The California Department of Agriculture maintains a list of quarantined pests harmful to the agriculture of this state. These pests may be either animal or vegetable. Agriculture Code Section 5341 provides to prevent the introduction into or the spread within the state of pests, the director shall maintain at such places within the state as he deems necessary plant quarantine inspection stations for the purpose of inspecting all conveyances which may carry plants or other things which are or are liable to be infested or infected with any pest. Agriculture Code Section 5344 and 5345 make it unlawful to fail to stop at an inspection station. These are the two sections that Mr. Dickinson challenges. He says that he should have never been stopped at the checkpoint. Now, Agricultural Code Section 5346 makes it unlawful for any person to conceal any plant from any plant quarantine officer or to fail to present it or any quarantine article for inspection at the request of such officer. Now that we know the law, the court conducts sort of a balancing test here. First, the state of California has a huge interest here. Despite what you think about the state of California, this state produces more than 40% of all fruit in the United States, and more than 30% of all vegetables in the United States come from the state of California. And some plants only grow here in California and nowhere else in the United States. The court also describes that once in a while, when a pest comes into the state, it can destroy millions of crops. There'd be huge damage. Millions of dollars would be spent on trying to get rid of the pest and get the production of all the agricultural plants back to the same level. So the state of California has a huge interest here. In terms of the motorists, the court says that individuals are being stopped only briefly. And even if an item that's quarantined is found within the vehicle, the individual is not being charged with a crime. Possessing a pest is not a crime. And that is because the Department of Agriculture is not interested in people. The Department of Agriculture is interested in plants. And so, for those reasons, the court says when we're balancing, we can also look at another case from the federal court. There, individuals were traveling from Hawaii to the continental United States, and they had some items that were prohibited by the Department of Agriculture. The court said it would not be feasible to stop the whole plane and make all the individuals wait on the plane while the officer from the Department of Agriculture would be trying to get a warrant. So getting a warrant that's usually required under the Fourth Amendment would not be feasible. And the court says, same thing here. We have a checkpoint that's being operated by the Department of Agriculture, even though it's a vehicular checkpoint. Same thing here. It would not be feasible, the court says, for the officers to obtain a warrant and create a backlog of vehicles at the checkpoint. So at the end of the day, here's what the court says, and here's your takeaway. Quarantine officers may stop motorists at inspection stations and request to look into the trunks of their vehicles without a warrant or probable cause, and that if the motorist voluntarily opens the trunk, the quarantine officer may look within and remove any plant material in plain view for further inspection. The court rejected defendant's suggestion that a sign should be placed at inspection stations or quarantine officers should advise motorists that they may refuse to give their consent to any search. So there you have it. We've now discussed drug checkpoints, ruse or fake drug checkpoints, informational checkpoints, and now agricultural checkpoints. I hope to discuss DUI checkpoints next, but in the meantime, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about these checkpoints, particularly agricultural ones. I know that many states have them, if not all of them. Also, thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button and listening to me here on the LAWSTACHE channel. For all the returning viewers, thank you so much for continuing to support me. I hit 10,000 subscribers over the weekend, which was a huge thing for me. I really appreciate it, and it is all thanks to you. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to lawstache.com and check out some of the merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts, hats, and other items. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday for another deep dive on another checkpoint case. Thanks for watching.